All right. I think we'll get started. There may be a few folks who join us over the next couple of minutes, but um, in in honor of everyone's time, thank you for joining us. My name is Olivia Bornick. I work for United Way and I'm the Assistant Director of the Community Engagement Portfolio within the Healthy Aging team at United Way BC. And we're delighted to be hosting this Healthy Aging Core webinar today, titled Getting Started, 5 Steps to Mobilizing Your Community. And our special guest is Paul Bourne. I'll introduce him more formally in a few minutes. Before we get started, Paul, sorry, next slide.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So before we formally launch into the content of today's webinar, I'd like to acknowledge that United Way British Columbia regionally works in areas in the lands of over 195 Indigenous communities across the province. We deliver our work in service to communities in BC's north, in the interior, the lower mainland, central and northern Vancouver Island. And in this space, we humbly acknowledge and recognize that many of the territories through which we travel, in which we conduct our work and deliver our services and programs, and the communities that we provide to support to are often in regions and lands that are unceded. As an organization with a provincial mandate and scope, our commitment is to honor the cultural distinctiveness in languages, governance systems, traditions, and cultural heritage of each community. Through applying the principles of reconciliation in our work, we offer our networks, our voices, and our resources in the spirit of uplifting and honoring the legacy and incredible resilience of Indigenous neighbours and community members around the province. In this space of learning, we also invite others to join us in moving forward with understanding, dignity, and respect towards reconciliation as we look collectively to address the inequities and injustices that continue to impact First Peoples throughout the province, colonially known as British Columbia. Next slide, Paul. So as we move into the content of today's session, I'd just like to take a moment and invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box. Feel free to share your name, your chosen pronouns. If you have an organizational affiliation, mention that too if you feel comfortable doing so, and also the territories from which you're calling in today. As we move through the webinar, just to note that you are welcome to turn on automatic closed captioning using the CC feature that can be found in your toolbox or your toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen. We will also have a question period towards the end of today's session. So I will ask you to keep your questions until the end. If you have thoughts or curiosities that come up and you'd like Paul to address or answer while he's moving through the content of today's webinar, feel free to post those throughout, and I will do my best to monitor those during the webinar and flow them back up to Paul and facilitate some conversation at the end of our time together. Also, just noting that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our Healthy Aging Core website and platform, and the slides will also be made available following this session. So with that, and it's great to see folks introducing themselves in the chat, so please feel free to continue to do that over the next few minutes. And I'm delighted now to welcome and introduce to you our presenter, Paul Bourne. And a little bit about Paul. He'll share more with you about his journey and his background and experience. But Paul really loves and embodies all things community. He's the author of 5 different books, including 2 Canadian bestsellers, and he'll mention some of them over the course of the session today. He's also the co-founder of, and for 20 years, was the CEO of Tamarack Institute and Vibrant Communities Canada. He currently supports communities as a coach, as a consultant, and also as a community conversations facilitator. If that's not enough, Paul is also a global faculty member of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, ABCD, and a senior fellow of Ashoka, which is the world's largest network of social innovators. He was also appointed to the Order of Canada in 2019. He brings an incredible, as you can tell, wealth and breadth of knowledge and experience and life journeys to this presentation and to his sharing today. And I'm delighted with that to turn it over to you, Paul, and just really explore this topic with curiosity as we learn from you and from one another in this space today. Thanks.
Lovely. Olivia, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for coming today and taking time from your busy schedules to learn. I love talking with you, and I fell in love with you at your social prescribing conference, at your aging conference in Vancouver. And I've always been a huge fan of United Way of British Columbia and all the partners there. So thanks for coming and thanks for all the amazing work that you're doing, particularly the social prescribing work that you're doing, and the scale and the breadth of that work and the thinking that you're doing is incredibly important and exciting for me. It's one of the great hopes, I think, in social change in Canada. Um, like I can't see you. You can see my screen and maybe a little picture of me. So I'm hoping that's okay. There's going to be a lot of slides here. Know that you're going to get the slides later, um, and um, and you'll be able to use them going forward. A lot of this work is based on this book, Breakthrough Community Change. It's my latest book. And I had promised staff at Tamarack that when I kind of retired from Tamarack, I haven't retired, but I did retire from Tamarack after 20 years, that I would write down everything that I knew. And so I had started it already. Um, and of course, I didn't write everything I know, but I wrote what I thought was important. And I wanted to create it like a guide so that those of you who are trying to mobilize your communities uh, would have an easy process to follow. Um, we advertised this as the 5-step process that will help us to identify people needed and the actions that will mobilize our community. And my understanding is that many of you, this is your work. You're going to refer people, work with people one-on-one in the social prescribing work, or you're going to mobilize your community to work together and advance the idea of social prescribing. Now, I know there are some of you on the webinar who are partners in that work and not directly employed to do that work. And I'm hoping that by following along, you'll be able to hear as well about this. You know, I have helped maybe at least 300 cities and communities do this work of mobilizing their community, of bringing together large groups of people committed to a cause, whether it's poverty reduction or the environment or youth futures, um, or even deepening community. How does a community, how do you organize a community and mobilize them to move this work forward on what we call a systemic level? So, at the beginning, it was kind of doing the collaborative work. So the collaborative work has a lot to do with building a lot of relationships, building trust relationships, and then over time, deciding whether people want to work together. And that could take often 2 years before people really felt confident in forming a kind of a large scale collaboration. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a faster way than this. And so I tried a number of things. And what I'm going to share with you today, I've probably now worked with about 50 communities using it. And what we've taken, what was once a 2-year process, we've been able to create at it in 6 months. And within 6 months, we get far better outcomes than we ever did in 2 years. So I'm hoping that by following this, you'll get a sense of it. I'm not assuming that when you've gone through a 1-hour presentation, you'll know exactly what to do, but I've also created a folder of examples that will really help you but you'll get a real good sense between this and reading Breakthrough Community Change, which many of you got um, at the gathering in Vancouver. Um, you'll have a good solid foundation for moving forward. Um, I remember working just fairly recently with a small town in Ontario called Elgin County. And it was an interesting process because we decided that we needed to remobilize the community. So in this case, the community was committed, was working toward a community change, but they needed to be remobilized. And so we used this process. And it was essentially that in the 5 steps that we used was that we identified the key stakeholders that needed to be brought together. We brought together those we trusted the most. Then those individuals hosted a large community meeting. In that case, it was about 115 people came. And remember, this is a fairly small community. Um, and that group of people generated what we called a listening report, fed it back to the community, formed a leadership team, developed a community plan, and re energized themselves. And in their case, they launched a 10-year strategy um, in which their goals were going to be met. It's a very exciting moment. Another group I remember working with, maybe one of the first groups that I used this methodology on, was the community of Des Moines, Iowa. And in Des Moines, they were, I think they said they were the ninth worst place for a person to be Black. And there was tremendous inequity in that community. So they wanted to change that. And they brought their community into a conversation by mobilizing, again, the key stakeholders, the ones that were closest to them. They were also United Way that led that work. And they brought together their community. And in that case, we spent a day and a half together. I remember that was a really unique community because we had the wealthiest person in Des Moines, which was a very interesting one, a multi-billionaire, and some of the lowest income people in Des Moines together for a day and a half. And it was fascinating and truly enjoyable and inspirational. At the end of that session together, and I'll be explaining that session to you in a moment, that we pull people together, they gave themselves a standing ovation because they said they had never been to a group meeting like this. And what we're trying to do is not only bring people together, not only getting them to agree that our work is important and that it needs to be advanced, we're wanting them to also feel committed to doing the work of social change and bringing these ideas forward in real ways that help people. Within 2 years, Des Moines was advancing the livelihoods of over 25,000 people per year in Des Moines, Iowa. It was the first time in their history that the needle had moved forward rather than backwards. And that has been sustained, become an incredible community in so many different ways. So just to show you that this is very real work and that the ideas I'm sharing with you today are tried and true. We've used them extensively. Here they are. They are actually quite straightforward. I'm going to talk about what I mean by writing a two-pager. It's describing just simply who we are and what we want to do. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. Secondly, we want to do some planning, but we want to bring a small, diverse group of trusted friends. So I'm going to ask you, who are the people that you trust the most? Who that you most want to work with? Uh, who you can talk about this and argue about all of the ideas that you're trying to advance with and bring them together first. That's not a scary notion. That's actually a lot of fun. Um, the third thing is that small group of people organize a big community conversation. Why? Well, I had thought, what does every group I work with do well? And that was have meetings and bring groups of people together and do training and that kind of thing, have sessions. And so I thought, well, if they do that, why don't we use that skill in bringing people together? And I'll show you how what we are proposing is a little bit unique because it's actually a community consultation. It's a big um, collaboration, but it's consulting people, asking people what they think is needed to be done. There's a way of doing that that gets people to sign on, and they then fill all the committees that you want to institute to mobilize things. And that's the forming of an implementation team. And then we implement for a collective impact. And we'll talk about that. That's the most challenging one. And really, stage 5 is after the 6 months. That's sort of in the 7th month when we're actually starting to implement the ideas that we're moving forward. But first, let's go back to why do this? Why is this important? And why is uniting your community important? I hope all of you have read this. It's the implementation guide on social prescribing. If you haven't, Olivia, please send it out to everyone. I think it's one of the best guides of its kind, and I've told the authors of it, well done, United Way. But there are pages 30 to 45 that talk about collaboration and talk about this work of mobilizing your community. And in there, it talks about why collaboration is important. And I think these are really straightforward, but they're saying instead of just helping people sort of fulfill their social prescribing needs as individuals, we want to mobilize our community. We want to form a collaboration, and that enhances service delivery. It increases creativity and innovation. We start to brainstorm, find new ways and exciting ways for people to work together, and new ideas for them to work on. Uh, it's a more efficient way. It's not just the one-on-one work, it's also working at the systemic level. It strengthens community networks, which is extremely important in social change. You amplify advocacy so that social prescribing becomes the norm in your community. Um, Thinking highly of seniors and new ways about aging becomes the norm. And then lastly, we learn together and we build our own capacity when we collaborate. So there's a lot of advantages to this work of collaboration. The collaborative premise um, and sort of important for us to think about as we do this work. If you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and strategies for addressing the shared community concerns of the organizations and community. That's the hope of collaborating. And so then you say, okay, I I agree that we need to collaborate. I buy into this collaboration. But what do we do when we're together? Like, what actually is the work of collaboration? And I'm saying beyond the theory, I like to say. Well, in its simplest terms, it's about people trusting each other enough to talk together. It's about people agreeing, okay, we're going to work together on this. We believe in it. We have a shared stake, which some people call a common agenda. We're going to talk about how we work together. What are the methodologies? I know collective impact is one of the most popular ways of collaborating now, but there are other ideas that people want to talk about and different ways of working together. We certainly, when we collaborate, we want to build a shared understanding of data. What really is happening? What do the numbers tell us about the problem we're trying to advance? Well, talking about the problem, we want to actually agree on what it is, and then the solutions and the action steps. So it's all familiar work. It's just recognizing that the magic is when we do this as a trust relationship and we have a common commitment. this is what we call the collaboration spectrum. And it just shows that there's a variety of things to think about. Even when we're competing, we're collaborating. When we're coordinating, we're collaborating. When we're cooperating with each other, we're collaborating. So there's a spectrum. And one of the beautiful things is that the more we collaborate, the more advanced our collaboration becomes. There is less turf, right? Turf being get out of my sandbox, go play in your own, instead of us building a sandbox together. And we're more fluid with one another. And this is the one I love. It goes from low trust in the compete to high trust in the collaboration. So we're lessening turf and we're increasing trust. And that is, in some senses, the magic formula. The sense that we're not competing with each other for funding. That if we do this well together, there will be more funding. We can learn how to bake pies. We don't have to worry about just that one pie and how is there, there's too many people to eat that pie. And we've seen that over and over again. When we work together, we build more resources. This is from the social prescribing book. I'm just showing it to you so that you go and read it. It's pretty cool, kind of how they show the progression in a different way than I just did. So let's move to the 5 steps. Olivia, are we doing okay? Do we have everyone's attention?
You're doing great, Paul. Thanks.
Nice. Okay, so let's get to this one. And you're going, Paul, what do you mean write a 2-pager? Well, it's just this simple. I feel that if you're the one who's doing the community mobilizing, and maybe a few of the people that you're working with, some of your sponsors, you sit down and you write out, who are we? What is the change we want to see? And how do we work together? I've pulled various examples from other communities together. And if you actually want to move these 5 steps forward, email me, paul@paulborn.ca, and I'll send you the whole package. And there's examples for every step that I have here. So you can just actually, in some ways, duplicate. At Tamarack, we joked R&D, rob and duplicate. So you take something that someone else did that is really good and you do one for yourself. But I actually did a little bit of work here. So I kind of just went to that social prescribing guide and I pulled out 3 paragraphs. Now, I expect you to fully modify these and to put your community name in and the fine nuances, but there's a lot in that guide that already begins to describe who you are. Why do we do this? Because in the next phase, we're going to bring a group of people together. Okay. So this is planning with a small, diverse group of trusted friends. We've got our 2-pager. We're saying, okay, we want to do this. This is who we are. This is the change we want to see. And this is how we envision the work to be done. Now we're going to bring together our friends, our trusted friends. And so these are really our colleagues, but hopefully they're people that we like and that we believe will work with us well. And what's their job? Well, I mean, in the first meeting, it's to review the 2-pager together and basically agree, who are we? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're all working on social prescribing together. We all believe that we want to advance it. Um, and we think that to collaborate, we're going to have more success than if we all just work individually. Okay. And then how are we going to do that? Now, this might take longer. I find that the agree on what do we want to do together, that might take 3 or 4 meetings. Now you're saying, what is this small group, Paul? How many? I like 8 to 10. It's kind of my thing. But it can start as small as 4, and it can go up to 8, 9, 10 people. And it's about sitting together over a period of time and believing that we want to work together, that we want to advance social prescribing or community well-being for seniors or for aging generally, health, better health outcomes, whatever we kind of agree upon, and then to say, okay, let's first of all brainstorm who would need to be involved, who would we need to involve, who are all the stakeholders that could possibly be involved. And we have an exercise for that. We call it the top 100 exercise. I'll show you that in a minute. And then we're going to invite them all together to a meeting, a big one. It's like a conference, a day to a day and a half. So this is kind of what we do in terms of top 100. We identify the top 100 leaders needed to work together for complex change. And we kind of, I always ask the question, if these 100 agreed, things would change. Now, you might be in a very small community and you'll say, Paul, I don't know if we've ever done 100. Every community has told me that. Doesn't matter if they're in a 1,000,000-person city or in a 10,000 person community. And inevitably, we can get a lot of people at the table. It might be 60, 70, but we get a lot of people. And what we're doing is we're brainstorming together. If you have my book, Community Conversations, there's a whole chapter on this. If you want to do this exercise, I have a 5-page step-by-step guide to help you do it. And what you're doing is you're brainstorming from these 4 sectors. Who are the people from the business community that we would like to invite to be in this conversation? Um, could they be pharmacists? Could they be owners of gyms, recreational facilities? Could they be other places, private counselors, that kind of thing? Who from the government cares about what it is that we're doing in our community? And it might be the head of the recreation department. It might be um, the commissioner of health, right? It could be from a variety of places, and it could be from a variety of levels of government. Of course, the social sector or the community sector, the United Way is one of that. There's many groups that are like that. And we can't forget citizens with lived experiences. So if we're working at doing social prescribing for healthy aging, we're going to want to bring seniors into this work. It might be clients, successful clients, or those that we're working with as participants. But just think that if we're going to bring 100 people together, we're wanting to bring, in a sense, 25% from each one of those sectors. And so we work together with as this small group of trusted friends, and we start to brainstorm. And I have a fun way of brainstorming that you'll see when I send you that exercise. And in doing that, we start to envision the system of caring. Who are all the people that care about social prescribing? Again, if you're not doing social prescribing, I'm going to use that as my primary example. Just think about your idea or issue. But what is the system of caring around social prescribing? Who cares about this? The doctors? Will they do social prescribing? Would the counselors do social prescribing? Would friends do social prescribing? Who does the social prescribing? And who cares about the people who are being socially prescribed? Can I actually say that? I don't think I've ever used that in that way before. But you know what I mean, that they're getting that that recommendation in their lives. And so when we get all of those people on, I usually use sticky notes. Um, and they're all up there, and you start to go, wow, that's our community. These are the people that we need to bring together. And they represent a diverse group of stakeholders. And so often I'll have people say, but Paul, I don't know any business leaders. But when you start brainstorming, you actually will see that you do. Right? And they might be board members of organizations that you know. They might be neighbors. They might go to church with you. any of those types of activities, there are people who care about the people that you care about and that you're bringing about change. So let's go to number 3. So we're doing this, and now what we're doing is we're saying we're going to invite that community who cares to a big community conversation. And we know what that is. Like, it's really a meeting in which 100 people, I'm going to say 100, in your group it might be 50 or 60, are coming together and they're having a day-long conversation about social prescribing. And they're going to agree on why this is important and why we as a community want to make it a priority. So how this works typically is it starts with the invitation. So let's go back to those 100 people who care, that system of caring. We need to invite them to the meeting. And what I do is I usually say, okay, I'm going to look for a business leader. I'm going to look for a social sector leader. I'm going to look for a government leader and a lived experience leader. And I'm going to get them to sign the letter. Just use their names. And they're the ones inviting people to this conversation. That simple act of having these diverse leaders invite the community usually gets these community of caring people, it catches them off guard. And they go, wow, I've never been invited by that kind of a diverse group before. And they come. I would suggest that in the 50 or more groups that I've helped do this, we normally have a 90% turnout. That means of the letters that we sent, we have 90%. In Des Moines, Iowa, what was so interesting, we had 110%. So people started calling us and saying, why weren't we invited? And so the group got bigger. I think we had 160 at that meeting. Um, and uh, and that's what was happening, is that people came and were very excited. And in the Elgin County example, the mayor was one of the people that were doing the inviting. So that made it also significant in that way. There's a letter we send, and again, if you are interested in doing this, I have copies of those letters that you can duplicate. You can just replicate, put your own ideas in there, of course, your own place and time. Um, and so there's that sort of background work we have to do before we can do the invite. And then we're going to want to develop an agenda. And it's kind of interesting because the agenda has been pretty much consistent in all 50 of them that we use. The first thing we do is we have the inviters welcome everyone and share why it's important that they're there today. Why am I here today? Why is social prescribing important to me? The second thing we do is we do 3 presentations. They're each only 10 minutes. First is we present the data. What is the data around healthy aging and social prescribing? Secondly, we do a presentation about our community. So let's say we're in Revelstoke and we do a presentation that says, these are the assets of Revelstoke. People in Revelstoke care, they're innovators, and they are good at social change, right? And it's a great community that's growing rapidly. Um, so we want to not only present what the problem is, but that we have all these assets, these people assets, and these other assets in our community that we can bring forth for social change. And the third presentation is, what are other communities doing? Which other communities similar to ours have been successful? And that's why it would be great if we could work across all of the groups that want to be doing this kind of community mobilizing, because that third presentation could be quite similar in every community. But it helps people say, oh, we're not the only people thinking about social prescribing. There's been lots of communities thinking about this. And it's not just British Columbia, it's all across Canada. And matter of fact, it's all around the world. And others have mobilized to make social prescribing extremely important in healthy aging. So that's the kind of uh, workshop we do. Um, then after that presentation, there's normally 3 questions that we converse around. The first one is, what's happening now? So that everyone in the room can share what they suggest is happening now around social prescribing. Then we um, ask the question, what's the change we want to see? And the third question is, what can we do? What could we do if we all work together? That's our morning. In the afternoon, we start brainstorming ideas of things that we could do to implement that would advance social prescribing and make it a priority in our community. So that's the conversation we host. We have note takers at every table. We have all these notes that we put together. We create a listening report out of our day, and we invite people to stay involved. And I have a form that you could use that you help to invite that invites people to stay involved, and we use all those volunteers. And I can say that of the 50 communities that I've worked with, there's been between 60 and 80% of the people in the room by the end of the community conversation that sign up to want to help and be involved. So it's this kind of interesting way because that's what we want. We don't just want the same group of 10 people. At the end of the big meeting, we have 100 people engaged from 4 different sectors. We have listened to them all and we have a listening report. We have enlisted a bunch of volunteers that are going to help us move things forward. And we have a leadership team that has organized all of this, and that's going to help us um, implement this work. And lastly, we've done a lot of research already for our community plan. So I think we're around 60 to 65% of the way to having a common agenda and a community plan, and we've just been together for 1 day. That's what makes this so efficient and yet so overwhelmingly exciting because these 100 people have had a meaningful day. I've honestly never had a day like this end on a down note. Everyone's excited. Everyone wants to keep things moving. I just shared with you, here are the 3 presentations. You'll get those, and here are the questions. So again, there's more detail in Breakthrough Community Change, but all of this is there for you in some detail. Okay, 4. We're going to form an implementation team to write the plan. What's going to happen is that remember, we have already all of those notes from the conversations that have been held. We have all the research we've done to present to people the data and the qualities and the assets of our community. So and then we have all those ideas that people brainstormed in the afternoon of the session. So really putting together the plan, we already have all the raw material. Now we just need a group of people to work on it together and agree on a path forward that they can recommend back to these 100 people. So we probably take about a month or 2 to put this plan together. Then we invite the 100 people together again, often just for 2 hours, and we present the plan and we say, did we hear you right? And does this look like a good way of advancing social prescribing for healthy aging in a way that we're all working together? And there'll be some debate and discussion, but essentially you'll have your plan and you'll have your commitment from the community. Um, Now, is it always that simple? No. Um, but what is great about this is it's a methodology that even when it's messy, has strong outcomes. When you're not using this methodology, you have so many paths that slow you down. You don't have a clear next step in most other collaborative methods. And so when you get a slowdown or you get a resistance, you don't know what to do. Here, the resistance is always in the form of a group always with a group of leaders that are hearing it rather than just you. And people are already committed to making something happen. So even when there's resistance, it's not a resistance to shut you down, it's a resistance to get an idea, a new, more exciting idea into play. What's interesting is that when you're doing this work, there is really going to be four ways that the ideas that you're going to get. You're going to really get, as a collaborative, one of the major things that you're doing in your community is that you're growing community awareness. You're building community will, and you're building community action. So that's what a collaboration does. It gets people moving in a certain direction. By working together, you're also starting to see what are the barriers to social prescribing, and you're beginning to shift some of those barriers. We call that systems or policy change. Um, and thirdly, by bringing groups together, you're starting to align different sectors so that they're working together on this in very real ways. And we can share some examples when we get to the question and answer period. And ultimately, what we're hoping to achieve is targeted and population level outcomes that your community, through social prescribing, is going to be advancing healthy aging in a very real way, in a almost revolutionary way. And it's been an interesting sense that we all know that social prescribing needs to be an epidemic in the best sense. And that traditional medicine, I love it, I use it, but it can't be the dominant pathway to health. There needs to be multiple pathways to health in aging. And social prescribing is something that advances mental health, it's something that advances physical health, it advances social health. Um, it really is a remarkable need in our society. We're going to move to question just um, and, I could talk about this implement for collective impact for a very long time. And I'm hoping that at some point I can do another webinar for you on this because it has its own kind of thinking and approach. And many of you have read about it. And of course, if you read the book, Breakthrough Community Change, there's a whole chapter on it that just helps you get a basic overview of it. Uh, but it is a way of implementing a strategy like this. And it's helpful and important. And I'm not going to go there right now because I know we're running close to the question period. So I'm going to just move through um, this next way. I've already talked about breakthrough community change. You'll get these slides. Here are some of the pages that I really would like you to look at. Um, and it's a really built as a step-by-step guide for you to follow all of this. Ultimately, this is worth it. Why? Because people will have better lives in our community. And that's a true outcome that we're looking toward. We will learn as a community, and this will produce better outcomes, not just today, but into the future. We're going to make social prescribing an epidemic in the most beautiful way. But how are we going to do that, and what is its result going to be? And this will start to shift systems and policies. And there are many countries that are way ahead of us on this. They are healthier, they're happier, they're more connected as people. And I know BC is a very special place, and I know you're way ahead of the rest of the country on so many things. Um, so set the pace, inspire the rest of us, and make this a great moment for Canadians. Okay, over to you and your question. Sorry for taking so long, but we are at 4:45 or exactly 1:45 your time, which is where I was hoping to be at this stage of the presentation. Questions? Olivia?
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. Lots, certainly my mind's spinning as I kind of weave the threads of these five steps you spoke to, and just think through different ways of bringing people together around a common agenda, right? To try to shift that dial and influence some of those levers for change. There's a question in the chat that I wanted to bring to you, and one that's been burbling for me a little bit. But so Victoria, and I don't know, Victoria, if you want to speak to this or unmute a little bit, asked about a tool called Place Speak. And I'm not sure if it's one that you're familiar with or one that you've used previously. Victoria, you shared a few more details in the chat as well. Feel free to unmute yourself and chime in if you want. I see that you're on the screen.
Hi, Victoria. You're still on mute. I wonder if Laura needs to unmute her.
Oh, disconnected from webcam. Victoria says that Place Speak is a geo-referenced social community trust network. I'm not sure if it's a tool that you've come across before, Paul, or that you've used in some of your
I haven't. I'm definitely
work.
going to look it up.
Okay.
Place, speak. Nice.
Place, yeah, Place Speak. And my colleague Laura has
Asking.
posted, oh, colleague Laura has posted in chat if there's, we're fairly small groups, so if folks also have curiosities or questions around content that Paul shared, or sticky
Or
points or
comment. Yeah.
challenges that you've experienced in your own community as you've moved forward in this work of trying to build these networks around common agendas and move the dial a little bit more on change in this way, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in as well.
Nice. Olivia, questions that you may have?
Yeah, I mean, one curiosity on my end, and Laura, feel free to chime in as well. My colleague Laura is also on the call, but as I was thinking a little bit about these five steps, Paul, and thinking also about the reach and scope of work that United Way BC is funding through the social prescribing programs and community connector roles across the province of BC, is sometimes the challenge of bringing folks together with intention where there might be barriers around travel or around engaging in. I mean, I think in my mind, as you spoke through these steps, what resonated for me is thinking about different tools or strategies to either convene people in hybrid formats or even different tools or methodologies or mechanisms to host these conversations and these kind of co-creative and generative spaces in virtual settings if we can't actually physically bring people together all in one place. There's huge value and impact in doing that, but I think sometimes there's barriers to enabling that work meaningfully when we might be trying to bridge larger geographical regions and folks that are in kind of fairly far, widely spread communities that are also trying to galvanize or rally around some network work.
Yeah, and I would suggest that almost all the meetings could be done virtually, but the big meeting, I would want to invite people to come in person so that they can feel each other's energy and see each other and work together that way. Um, I, I, I've found that to be extremely useful, and there's really no other way of bringing that kind of momentum to an issue. And I know that sometimes takes a lot. It takes people maybe a day to travel there, spend the night, and then spend the day, and then go back the next day. Um, but I truly feel that they will find it worth it. And there still are quite a number of face-to-face events happening. I know that many of them are virtual, but just like us all coming together in Vancouver was important to build momentum. I think it could be really important in a community in advancing this work. But only really that one, the big meeting, where you want to have people feel each other's energy and work in small groups to identify what needs to be done. You can get so much more done in a face to face. I'm a huge believer in virtual. Um, but we haven't been able to make that work. So if someone can, I would love to learn from you.
Thanks, Paul. I'm seeing a few other questions pop up in chat that I want to share out with you. So one is, yeah, just as we think through barriers to engagement and participating in some of these gatherings and meetings, Mandy asks, recommendations around hosting a meeting during the day or in the evening after work hours. Just any reflections on your own experience around either timing of meetings and or other more traditional barriers to engagement that are important for community connectors and or others in this space of convening to really give some thought to.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think you could do it over several evenings, but I would rather than do a Saturday if that becomes our big issue, if it's a work thing. Um, but I found it remarkable the number of people, even business people, that will take the day to come to an event like this if we get the right four inviters. That's really critical to find out who those four inviters are, and we convince them to come and that they'll spend the day together with us, and then others will then also make that available. So it's kind of like a full day. That seems to work the best. I don't know. I mean, I kind of know why. It's that social connecting, it's that sense of building energy together, it's feeling that sense of community and possibility together. That's been our experience. And yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And thoughts around Victoria asks what kind of like cold outreach methods work best. And I'm thinking Victoria's asking this in the context of that invitation space potentially. So email, social media, or LinkedIn. And Victoria's saying yes. So, or like paper mail out. Sometimes that can actually
Oh,
also be depending on the audience you're trying to engage, and also with a lens to you shared the importance of thinking about, a 25% in terms of the sectors that are represented or the different voices and perspectives that are represented in a space. Um, are there different strategies that you found to be more effective in that invitation phase of the convening?
yeah, very nice. I mean, first of all, remember we have this small group of trusted friends, and they're the ones who've identified the 100. So most of the 100 are at least known. If not, we don't know them. You know what I mean? But I would say usually around 50 or 60, sometimes 70% of the people we identify that we want to invite, we already know. So, secondly, we're getting these four inviters. So just imagine if the government inviter would be the director of health or the commissioner of health for the region. The other one might be a business leader, that might be a prominent, I don't know, pharmacist. Um, the social sector what might be, a community health network or a prominent seniors leader, and and then a lived experience, and you get a letter from them, and sure, it's an email because I would say 90% send out emails, personalized. Dear Mary, dear Jack, dear Victoria, um, as a community leader, we would like you to join us on this very important day to learn and to talk about the future of social prescribing in our community. Why is this important? So we have a letter like that. And then often in the letter, we'll say that this letter is not transferable. In other words, you can't send someone. And if you can't come for the whole day, that's okay. We'll hold other meetings in the future. So we're making it very high level and asking for big commitment. And that seems to be part of what draws people in. Um, then we sometimes, if we haven't heard something from someone, we start getting on the phone and we call them, or we send them a personalized email. So we've done all those types of strategies to get the right people there, because that's the
Mm-hmm,
key. It's not only to host the meeting, it's to get the right people to the meeting, uh,
mm-hmm,
who can actually bring about change.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's thoughtful, thought-provoking, Paul. Thank you. And as I think about this, and another thought connected to this is that vision, that idea of getting the right people into the space for that big meeting, right? And also thinking around either, maybe it's a twofold question. It's how do you keep the right people engaged over a longer period of time, recognizing that maybe there'll be a shift in terms of your understanding of who needs to continue to be part of
Mhm.
some convening or networking or gathering around a common agenda, but that can be really sticky sometimes. I find there's some excitement and interest, and an invitation, especially if it's around something that's fairly new to a community, can generate a lot of buzz and hype initially. And we are all really busy and we're pulled in multiple directions. So if there is a need to continue gathering or convening over time, how do we maintain strategies for maintaining that and sustaining that interest and that commitment and that buy-in over the longer term?
Yeah, and I saw that question here as well. Uh, Olivia, it's an interesting point. Like, first of all, there's a belief that this work that we're doing, it's not going to happen because we are nice people doing good work. There's a whole system out there that wants to keep health protected in their own way. So we're always going to be the nice thing to do. So social prescribing is nice. It's not central, right? And I have a personal belief that social prescribing should always be prescribed first before we do drugs, for instance, because it's a way of thinking about how we live, right? And that takes us back to a lot of core values: the value of community, the value of family, the value of faith groups, the value of um, social groups that we have, the use of natural resources and the importance of the environment, how we build our communities, and how they make us feel. All of these are deep contributors to well-being, particularly as we age. I should say particularly as we age only because of the healthy aging group that we're all part of, but you know what I mean? It's for all of us.
Mm.
Um, and to think that well-being is going to your doctor, I think it's part of the solution, but we can't, but we're trying to move away from that. That isn't the primary way to be healthy. It helps us to be healthy. So in order for a community to start building like this, and it's the question, if social prescribing was a municipal priority, how then would we rethink how we build our community? You know, how we approve a building. One of my
Mm.
clients looks at design through the lens of joy. And they say no building should ever be approved in our city that does not evoke joy. Well, what does that mean? Well, these are developers. There are 11 developers who do this work. And they're saying they don't want to create an ugly city. They don't want to create a city that makes you feel bad about yourself. So they want regulations that make us the most beautiful and friendly city in the world. And so I'm going, you guys are amazing. Like, really, I didn't even ever thought of this, you know? But imagine if we start to say that well-being is in physical structure, well-being is in relationships, and we're going to revolutionize our community so that those are a priority.
Mhm.
And that excitement, it's the quality of the vision. You know, it goes beyond saying, well, we want 5 staff who will do the social prescribing work in our community. That's not going to evoke people. That's not going to keep them excited, right? Because it's just another service delivery. I'm not saying it's not important. It is. But what we need is a big, bold vision. And then the leadership team that meets regularly. In Des Moines, Iowa, they still meet regularly. There's 3 times a year that certain data is released by the state. And 200 to 300 agencies and businesses meet every evening when that data comes out. And it's the front page story of the next day of every newspaper. It's just so interesting
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're able to sustain that momentum and take real pride in the community that they're becoming.
Well, I think you've left us with a mighty task, but an inspiring one too, Paul. I'm hearing, as a takeaway as we wrap up this webinar is how is, build a bold vision, right? What does it take and what role can each one of us play in building that bold vision around increasing social connectedness, addressing isolation, and building these more integrated and what's the word, integrated and consolidated systems of support, right? And relationships and circles of care. And on that note, I wish we had more time to talk. It's 2 minutes after 2. I just want to
Excellent.
hold my hands up to you, Paul, and thank you so much for your time today and your generosity of sharing and learning and resources. I know that you've offered to share out more tools and templates with our audience members on the call today, or the participants on the call. So we will be sharing out a follow-up email to all of you after this webinar with a link to the
Already in
recording.
the chat box too, Olivia, already.
Oh,
So
great.
great.
Okay.
And
And
yeah,
Paul's email is
I've
in the
got
chat.
about 10, probably 10 sample things that, if you want to do this work, let me know and I'll send them out to you.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
So
Thanks,
always
Olivia.
ha always
Thanks,
handy to
Laura.
have more tools in our toolboxes. So a huge thanks to you, Paul, and to everyone else for joining us today. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the afternoon and look forward to seeing you again at a future webinar. Take
Thanks,
care, everyone.
everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Olivia. Bye-bye.